Today is Monday. Let's get going, guys. Rockfin is ready. Okay.
Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Happy Monday, guys. Welcome back. I hope you had a great weekend. And welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Quick shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. What's going on, guys? Did everyone have a good weekend? I hope so. I want to give quick shout outs to people in the chat, and then we'll get started with tonight's stories. What's going on? Johnny Dempsey cannot wait with a smiley face. Welcome. Shout out to Rodrigo. Been with Sabby since 8K, back when gas was more affordable. I feel you, Rodrigo. I feel you. You've been with me for a while. Oh, man. That was before I hit 10K. Wow. Greetings, Hannah G says, hi, Sabby, with a wave. What's going on, Steven says, colonization has been great for America. Cheers. GB, thumbs up, US. I don't know what that means. Great Britain? I don't know. What's going on, Steven? Shout out to Notori Leaf says, rock on and fire. Greetings, the traveler says, happy Monday. What's going on? Lawrence Johnson says, doobie-doobie-doo, chivalry timbers, talk like a pirate day. They still do that. Lawrence is also a Sabby member. What's going on? Saul says, hello there. Shout out to Bad Cookie, said, swinging over here from the RBN live stream. Oh, yeah. That's a good one. That's a good one tonight. What's going on? Sweary Fairy, who's a Sabby member, says, quote, Luxuria. Hello, beautifuls. Shout out to Eric T. Red, who's a Sabby member, says, greetings to all lefty friends. Oh, this jumped on me again. Sorry. Shout out to Nays Garden says, hey, Sabby, what's going on, Nays? Greetings, Lewis says, howdy. Shout out to CBC Voter. Happy Monday, Sabby Sabs. Happy Monday to you too. What's going on, Jay says, if the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body, then only lefties are in their right mind. Ooh, interesting. Greetings, gamer says, hello. Shout out Tumblebug. Wow, I actually caught a live stream while it was really live. That's a first for me. Hi, Sabby. Hello. Greetings. Shout out to Angela. Oops, I skipped you somehow. Hello, all you beautiful people. And you had me at Dawn Lemon Removed. Gonna be an interesting story. Gonna be, because I predicted this. Months ago. So here we go. Greetings, Leroy, who's a Sabby member, says, the sis Sabby love, what's good, comrades? I remember following Sabby on Twitter, and that was before she did live streams. She has been based since. Thanks so much, Leroy. Yeah, for those who don't know, I didn't always do live streams. When I first started my show, I actually did pre-records and then I would upload them. And I actually started off doing interviews and then I moved into news and mixing news with interviews. So yeah, it's been a while. You guys remember that song? If I got it stuck in your head again, I apologize. Shout out to Edward says, hi, Sabby. Hello. Greetings, Bruce. Damn, just saw Olami take TYT to class about defund. I saw that. I saw that. What's going on? Jared Brown says, hey, Sabrina, love. Shout out to Saul. Thank God Sabby is on. Oh, that's sweet. What's going on? Brenda V says, hi, Sabby. Hello, Brenda. Greetings, information retrieval. Kids in cages started under Obama. This is true. Some people forget that. Some forget. I do not. All right. Shout out to Gilbert H. Since I can say that I've been alive. Welcome. Greetings, Where Pilgrim says, hey, everybody. All right. Got a good show lined up for you tonight. Want to give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Guys, thank you so much for your support. All of their names are listed here. If you want to be a patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. You guys really do help keep the lights on around here. Thank you so much for that. And you can also see their name scrolling across the bottom of the screen there at the ticker. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Okay, we have quite a bit to discuss tonight. Let's go ahead and show that thumbnail. We're going to dive into it. We're going to dive in. All right. Tonight, we are discussing Chris Hedges' Pied Piper. We are going to get into this Pied Piper strategy that has been done by the Democratic Party. Does it work? Does it not work? And Chris Hedges is really going to take them to task about that one. We're also going to discuss Don Lemon is removed. Don is gone. As you can tell from the look on Don's face, he may be wondering what is happening here. I'm going to explain to you why I believe this is going on. I'm also going to discuss Governor Charlie Baker is under fire. That's right. I talked to you just a couple days ago about migrants being moved to Martha's Vineyard by Governor Ron DeSantis. There has been an update on that I want to let you know about today. And there's a lot going on. I don't think I've seen Governor Charlie Baker trend on Twitter as much as he has the past couple of days. And last but not least, we are also going to discuss Gen Z housing. What is happening with Gen Z and why will it look familiar to some of you? I'm actually going to get started with that story. So those of you who are millennials, you may have been through this before. So this is not a surprise to you. And even some who are Gen X, to be honest. But it's happening again. And this time, the most concerned generation is Gen Z. Let's go ahead and look at this. So Business Insider reported this. Some Gen Zers are hoping for a housing market crash so they can afford to buy a home. Again, this is not new. This has happened with my generation. Some of us are still in that situation, in that position, hoping for this kind of thing. It's really sad that you have to hope for a housing market crash to be able to afford a home. But here we are. Let's go on. Let's get into it. As home buyer activity becomes increasingly frigid, make this bigger for the people in the back, talk has been simmering for months about the possibility of the entire U.S. real estate market imploding. Although experts are divided on whether or not America's housing ecosystem is bracing for a correction or a crash, new data from analytics company Consumer Affairs shows that many Americans are expecting, and in some cases hoping for, the latter, especially young adults. The company surveyed 1,003 Americans to gauge their perceptions on a potential housing crisis. According to their results, 78% of respondents think we'll soon face a housing market crash, and nearly half believe it will happen in 2023. So that is actually just around the corner. Of all the demographics, Gen Z is the group that wants it the most. Indeed, 84% of surveys respondents born between 1996 and 2015 said they wanted a market crash. Their reasoning, the hope that a crash will help them better afford a future home purpose. So, I'm going to go back in there in just a second, but there's something that I want to mention in reference to some of us that were millennials. I can only speak for my generation. It was not uncommon when I graduated college to have to move back in with your parents for a year or two or however many years you needed to save up money just for you to be able to afford your own apartment. That was not uncommon at that time. In fact, they were calling us the Boomerang Kids. There was a movie that really highlighted this also. It was a romantic comedy, but they touched on this issue, and that movie was called Failure to Launch. If you haven't seen it, I recommend watching it. It's with Matthew McConaughey. And he had this kind of thing, this failure to launch thing where he had moved out and then he ended up back home with his parents. His was for a different reason. But if you actually watch the extras with that movie, they actually talk about the failure to launch phenomenon. And they talk about young adults moving back in with their family for different reasons, mainly financial reasons. So there's a reason why that was happening, right? There's a reason why it's still happening, and now more so for the Gen Z generation, because people are not being offered a living wage. They're not being offered the salaries that they should be offered in order for them to live on their own, let alone buy a home. Homes require down payments, and unless you are an active member of the United States military, most of us have to put down a down payment. I point out the military because active members of the military can get what's called a VA loan, which they actually put 0% down. My dad qualified for that. So he didn't have to put down thousands and thousands of dollars on a home to get a home. Most people are not in that situation. Gen Z was the generation most likely to want a housing crash or correction so they could buy a home. Despite their hopes for a cooler market, Gen Zers have the least saved for a home. Now, why would they have the least saved? Well, if we look over the past couple of years, rent has increased. It's actually astronomical in places like San Francisco, New York City, here in Boston, DC. I could go on, but that is even starting to become an issue in southern cities as well. And I touched on this a couple of days ago. Cities like Dallas is now becoming quite expensive. Austin, Texas is starting to hit that mark. Raleigh, North Carolina is getting there. Nashville, Tennessee is also getting there, because what has happened over time, a lot of people have left these expensive cities like San Francisco, New York, and Boston, and they moved further south. Now they don't have enough housing per se to keep up with the demand. A couple of years ago, I went to visit my friend. She was getting married in Nashville. She lives there. She's been there for years. At that point in time, she told me Nashville, Tennessee was the fastest growing city in the East. And when something like that happens, eventually the demand will increase. So they'll raise the price of the rent because they know the people coming in are going to pay for it. This also can lead to gentrification. They come in, the prices go up, the people who are from those neighborhoods, working class and poor, are pushed out. In 2022, housing affordability has fallen to a 3-decade low. The downturn stems from a combination of factors, but mainly rising inflation and interest rates. It's not just rising inflation, as I just pointed out to you. So correct that, Business Insider. As well as a dearth supply that has kept buyers from competing for a limited amount of housing stock, as some of the factors that contributed to the housing crash of the mid-aughts reemerge, like soaring home prices and fading buyer demand. It is no surprise that Gen Z, a demographic experiencing the most challenges to home ownership, is rooting for an icy market downturn. Now, I want to speak for a minute about a limited amount of housing stock. I happen to live in a state that has that, in Massachusetts. Finding a single family home is not easy. I know, I went through it. So I can tell you this, part of the problem that we have here is people, for the most part, were not selling their homes. They were staying in those homes. At the same time, Massachusetts, at least Eastern Massachusetts, was not building new homes. So the inventory was going to be an issue. So you have a huge demand, people trying to buy, but they can't because the inventory is just not there. So the inventory that is available, they raise the prices on those. Homes that should technically cost about $350,000 are going for $700,000. It's absolutely ridiculous. So the person that has the most money to put down on that down payment, they're the ones that are most likely to get the home. If you are someone who just graduated from college, or maybe you didn't go to college, but you've been saving and you had a down payment, now it is more difficult for you. You're competing with people who are wealthy. And this goes back to the class issue. How do you fix this? Well, I would say in my state, they need to build more homes. Homes that people can actually afford. Let's go back in. As some of the factors that contributed to the housing crash of mid-aughts reemerge, we did that part. After all, market crashes have led to depreciating home values in the real estate market. This was the case in 2008. Okay, so I went through that. Some of us have gone through that. When a bursting housing bubble contributed to a global recession that triggered rapid price declines in the US. However, despite Gen Z's expectations and a few bearish outlooks, the majority of experts maintain that prices are unlikely to plummet like they did before. Instead, they expect something more like a correction, which will entail a gradual drop in prices to more sustainable levels. I've heard this before, and I haven't seen it. And I've been here for over 10 years, and I haven't seen it happen yet. So that's that. It's already happening in markets across the country. Data published in August from S&P Dow Jones showed price growth turning negative in 6 major metropolitan areas from May through June. Now, during this period here, and it says, but the declines were modest. See, it's not falling as much as it should. That's the problem. I can speak for us here locally. During the pandemic, there were a lot of people that left Boston, especially people that worked at companies that said you can work remotely indefinitely. A lot of people that worked at Google, Facebook here, they were like, well, then if the state is shut down and I'm paying all this money to live in the city and I can't do anything in the city, and my employer saying I can work from home indefinitely, I'm going to move further south where it's more affordable. It doesn't make sense for me to stay in the city where I can't do anything in. So you had people move out. And part of the problem was that people did not hold out long enough. The rents did start to decrease, but as soon as September came around and the colleges reopened, people went back into those apartments. So if people would have held out a little bit longer, same thing for New York City, people could have held out until they dropped the rent to like $1,000 a month, but people didn't do that. So now the rent has increased again. Rent is high again here. Same with home ownership. Of all markets, prices fell the most in Seattle, where the S&P Core Logic Index slid 1.9% through the month. Home prices in San Francisco, San Diego, Los Angeles, Denver, and Portland, which lead the country in price declines, each saw home prices tumble less than 1%. So these are the cities that lead the country in price decline. San Francisco, San Diego, LA, Denver, and Portland. But the prices only fell less than 1%. And these cities are expensive to buy homes in anyway. I don't know one person that can afford a home in San Francisco. Not one. Or Los Angeles or Denver or Portland, any of those cities. I don't know anyone who can afford one. So we'll go down here, and I just want to highlight this part. Danielle Hale, the chief economist at Realtor.com, says home prices may fall further in 2022, but a dramatic decline is very unlikely. I hope everyone heard that. And that means the nation's young adults will have to wait even longer to see affordability return to the housing market. And that's if that even happens. I don't think it's likely for home prices to fall significantly. That's coming from Danielle. Prices are still growing annually by double digits. We have a long way to go before we see prices decline. And this is what I've been saying before. This is not going to change anytime soon unless there is some type of demand or there is some type of push from people on the outside. This is another example to point to when people talk about electoral politics. The politicians in DC are not solving the housing issue. It's been a problem for a long time. At the same time, there is a concentrated amount of wealth that is keeping it that way. Case in point, Case Study QB, shout out to him for this clip. I want you to listen to this clip from Fox News where they talk about the amount of wealth that's in a city like New York City. Listen to this.
You got to keep the money here, though. Apparently, there's a lot of people living here with a lot of loot. They found 346,000 millionaires are living in New York. That's extraordinary. There's almost 60 billionaires. If they grow unhappy with the state of living here, they're gone.
They're gone. I don't know. Why are you still living here, guys?
Well, a lot, to be clear, have left.
Of course. I think that they have properties here, probably. But that's why when I complain about, paying taxes or how high taxes are, especially living in New York, sometimes people will say, oh, that's not sensitive. Don't you want to help people who need it? And you just have to say, how good of a job do you think the government is really doing at using this money to go to people who need it? I mean, where does it go? I mean, everyone who lives here, we pay so much in taxes. Then you walk outside and you have to say, where exactly is this money going?
Well, I think the billionaires need to fuel up the jet, right, Smitty?
Yeah.
Or at least maybe they already have.
To the point that all the Americans, big cities, have lost a lot of that money. A lot of people, look at Ken Griffin in the city of Chicago. That tax money, his company's tax money, it has now fled, including Boeing as well.
Okay, listen to this part here at the beginning.
You got to keep the money here, though. Apparently, there's a lot of people living here with a lot of loot. They found 346,000 millionaires are living in New York. That's extraordinary.
Let's pause here and let's take a look at this. Over 340,000 millionaires live in New York City. 737 centimillionaires live in New York City, and 59 billionaires. That's high amounts of wealth for a select group of people. When you hear the number over 345,000 people or millionaires, that sounds like a lot, but you have to look at the population in New York City. There's millions of people in New York City, right? Actually, I think it's more than that. But over 345,000 millionaires live in New York City. And at the same time, they're not the majority. The majority of New Yorkers are working class or are poor. The majority of them will never become millionaires. So this is part of the problem. When you have so many people, that's still a lot of millionaires. But when you have people who have wealth like that, and they're living in these areas, in places like New York, in places like Boston, although I would say Boston doesn't have as many millionaires as New York City does, or places like Los Angeles, it makes it more unaffordable for the other people who live there because they know that those millionaires will pay the prices for those penthouses and it can drive the rent up. But this should not be the case. This is the problem that we have with wealth in this country. You mean to tell me there's over 340,000 millionaires in New York City, and at the same time, they have a problem with homelessness? At the same time, they have a problem with people not being able to afford a 1-bedroom apartment, let alone a studio apartment. And you have all these millionaires. This is the problem with the wealth inequality. It doesn't make any sense. Could they tax them more? Absolutely. They could tax them more. And then maybe you can fix these issues, the housing issue for people in New York City. As long as I've known, New York City has always been expensive, but this is ridiculous. So all of this money, all of these millionaires in one city, and people are still sleeping out on the street. And we wonder why people can't afford homes. This doesn't make any sense. Now, this is something that I would say the Occupy movement really highlighted. This doesn't make any sense. If you have this in your city, you shouldn't have a homeless problem. You shouldn't have people being evicted. You shouldn't have people that are job insecure. You shouldn't have people that are having difficulty paying for medical bills. You shouldn't have people that are having difficulty just getting time off because they're sick. This does not make any sense. What are they there for? What are they doing? Are they contributing any to the city? Are they helping out any of these communities, these low-income communities? Are they keeping all the wealth to themselves? Big problem. Big problem. Now, again, you have to note it is on Fox News. So, of course, they're going to call it out because it's a liberal city per se. But like I just told you, the South, some of these other red areas aren't far behind. Dallas is developing this issue. Nashville is developing this issue, and it can continue on. So what do we do for Gen Zers who are trying to afford a home? They're going through the same thing that a lot of us millennials went through. What do? You can put pressure on the politicians in DC. You can try, but I'm going to tell you, you have a better chance putting pressure on the local politicians in those areas. Put pressure on people like Eric Adams. He's the mayor. Put pressure on people like Michelle Wu. She's the mayor of Boston. This is why we showed up to those rallies, to put pressure on her about the housing situation. Some of the problems that we are fighting against, I think we took the wrong strategy of trying to fight against those problems using the politicians in DC. When some of these issues are local issues, and we really need to be putting the pressure on the mayors and the governors in those places. That's what I think needs to happen. We'll go to some of the comments here. Gamer says, I still live with my parents. See, exactly. Not new. Sean, newsflash, life under capitalism is impossible and repulsive. Felipe, they have another problem. The baby boomers are dependent on the price for their retirement to fund it. If the prices dropped, their retirements would be screwed. They'd need 2.5 million for retirement of 2. It's crazy when you think about it. Saul, every time the needs of the people were considered was not through politics, it was by the people rising up. We are done voting for the same thing in the duopoly. Exactly. Saul's right. It was done by the people rising up. You can look at other movements that we've had in this country, and I really think the Occupy movement was headed in the right direction until here Obama came and broke that up. And then that message was put through the Democratic Party through Bernie Sanders' campaign. If that momentum would have continued, I think, on the outside, imagine what we could have accomplished with those same demands. So I think Occupy did have the right message. Go ahead and hit that like button, guys. That helps me with the algorithm. Thank you so much. And thanks for the reminder there, Eric, because I do forget to do these things. I forget to say. Okay, we're going into our next story, and this is about Probably not your favorite person. But this is about Don Lemon. Now, Don Lemon has been removed from his primetime spot on CNN, which is huge because the primetime show typically is the one that has the most ratings. That's the show that most people watch. I'm assuming you probably make more money hosting the primetime show. Now, they're probably not going to cut his salary because he's been there for as long as he has. But let's be real. Don Lemon is saying that this is not a demotion. Come on. I think this is a demotion because, like I told you, most people watch the prime time slot. But this has been a problem that's been going on with CNN. I feel like they are really trying to clean house. And I predicted this. Actually, when Chris Cuomo was removed, I said, well, he got into trouble, but we already knew back then CNN was having difficulty with their ratings. After Chris Cuomo, what happened next? We saw that Brian Stelter was also removed. He didn't have any accusations against him that caused that removal. Again, I think this is going back to the ratings issue that CNN is having, and I'm going to address that in just a second. But I want to play this clip here from Case Study QB. Shout out to Case. Fox News clip. Don Lemon loses his primetime show to the morning show. Oh, dear. Let's get into it. Let's go in.
Don Lemon getting squeezed, the liberal host escaping the network's purge of the woke, but losing his primetime gig to front the channel's new morning show. But that's not the way he sees it.
This is not someone moving me. And by the way, this is not someone saying, you must move to the right, Don Lemon. You must not be so, give so much of your perspective. None of that has happened. All of that is fodder for Twitter, which is not real. So stop it. I was not demoted.
Joe Concha joins us now. Joe, it sort of sounds like he's trying to convince himself. What's going on here?
I'm not sure anyone, Carly, could look any more insecure on television after being demoted than Don Lemon did last night, but there it was last night in plain sight. Can you imagine, by the way, what the planning conversations were like over at CNN before they decided to make this move? Here's the CNN's new president, Chris Licht, right? Hey, who's the lowest rated host in primetime across all three cable news networks? Well, sir, that would be Don Lemon by far. Wow, I think we have our man. I mean, what conclusion can you possibly come to make Don Lemon, you go from giving him 2 hours, which are the lowest rated in cable news, to giving him 3 hours? Yeah, great move. Oh, by the way, I think Caitlin Collins, who also is part of this new team over at CNN, she's a decent White House correspondent. She certainly goes about her job a lot differently than Jim Acosta did in making himself the story, but that doesn't make her a morning host, by the way. So I don't think Steve and Ainsley and Brian had very much to worry about. The numbers will probably be the same in the mornings where CNN is a distant third. And I'm not sure putting one of the most partisan people in the history of cable news in Don Lemon, who used to beg to go viral on Twitter before he said it wasn't real, putting him on in the mornings is going to bring them to the center in the manner that new management wants over there. So rearranging the deck chairs is the only analogy I could think of right now in terms of Titanic over at your, well, I guess we could call him a rival, but you have to actually be competitive to be a rival, Carly Todd.
Ouch. That hurts. That was a sting. He said you have to be competitive to be considered a rival. Yikes. I want you to hear here again what Don Lemon said about not being demoted, and I'm going to debunk this.
Don Lemon getting squeezed, the liberal host escaping the network's purge of the woke, but losing his primetime gig to front the channel's new morning show. But that's not the way he sees it.
This is not someone moving me. And by the way, this is not someone saying, you must move to the right, Don Lemon, you must.
Okay, he's saying that part, you must move to the right, Don Lemon, is because apparently CNN is under new management, and it was released that new management kind of wants CNN to pander a little bit more to the right. He wants different views and opinions there, of course. Not progressive views or leftist views or socialist views or Marxist views, but you get where I'm going here. But he wants that other perspective to be represented there as well. Has not gone over well with people. In fact, audience members have been giving like pretty bad feedback about that, but it is what it is. New management, and they change things. So that's what he's referring to when he says that no one's telling me to move to the right.
Not be so, give so much of your perspective. None of that has happened. All of that is fodder for Twitter, which is not real. So stop it. I was not demoted.
Joe Concha.
So he says he was not demoted, but they're moving him to the morning show. And when you're moved to the morning show, technically you are being demoted. You can be demoted in different ways. Demoted doesn't just necessarily mean that you have a decrease in salary. Sometimes it's a decrease in your position. And I've seen that happen in higher ed as well, where people have been demoted. They let them keep their salary, but they knock them down to a lower level position because either they weren't performing well, or mainly because they weren't performing well. In this particular situation, however, CNN's ratings have been decreasing ever since Joe Biden won in 2020. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. You can look at the numbers for yourself. And it's hit all spectrums. It's hit the primetime spots. Chris Cuomo was going through this as well. So was Brian Stelter. That's why he's gone. And so people are asking, why haven't they completely removed Don Lemon? I'm going to show you that in just a second. But moving someone from a primetime spot and putting them on the morning show, it's a slap in the face. Anyone who has done broadcasting for a long time will let you know, typically the people who are on the morning show, those are usually people that are either just starting out, people who are not as experienced, people who may not pull in as many ratings, many viewers, right? The people on the primetime spots, those are the people that give you your numbers. Those are people like the Anderson Cooper. That was a Chris Cuomo. That was Don Lemon. So taking him off of that spot and putting him on the morning show, yes, that is a slap in the face. He can try to deny it all he wants to, but if you've been through broadcasting like I have, you know that is a demotion technically. Now, to answer that question, why didn't they completely remove him the way that they removed Brian Stelter? I think they know that they would receive a lot of flack from people if they did that. Now let's go into that. CNN ratings continue to tank as boss Chris Licht has work cut out for him. So this is Chris. So listen to this. CNN continues to hemorrhage viewers as new cable news boss Chris Licht scrambles to remake the primetime and morning lineups in an effort to reorient the channel to more centrist reporting. You guys see what's happening here? Centrist reporting. And the reason why he wants to pivot towards that is because he believes that that will actually increase the ratings. Okay. Notice here it says CNN continues to hemorrhage viewers. They are tanking, you guys. They are losing viewers. The embattled cable network has fallen even further behind perennial leader Fox News and the slightly revamped MSNBC, according to their latest ratings. So Fox News is ahead of MSNBC and MSNBC is ahead of CNN. CNN is not ahead of either one of them. CNN is in a bad place. The ratings are down really dramatically year over year. Now, that's coming from a seasoned media exec. I'm not sure the company understands how hard it is to dig out. Again, this goes back to Trump being in office and Joe Biden being in office. That's what a lot of this has to do with. The turnaround that he had to do was pretty incredible. Even though Licht knows what he's doing, The Late Show with Stephen Colbert and CBS This Morning has his work cut out for him. Now, or he's the executive producer, former executive producer of those two shows. Now let's go down here. This is important. In August, Fox News dominated with 9 shows, making the top 10 highest rated cable news show. You see that? Only MSNBC's Rachel Maddow eked out 5th place, ranking with 2.7 million viewers, lagging behind Fox's The Five, Tucker Carlson tonight, Hannity, and Jesse Waters prime time. This goes back to what I've said before. Most of the money is on the right. Most of the money is not in liberal media and is definitely not in left independent media. There's some people who have reached there, but they've been doing this for years. But for the most part, when it comes to mainstream media, most of the money is on the right. And I'd say the same for independent media too. So just keep that in mind. Now, the only CNN show to crack the top 25 was Anderson Cooper 360, and that's in 25th place with 950,000 viewers. So even Anderson Cooper's show doesn't crack 1 million viewers. And again, like I said, I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that Trump is not in office anymore. As much as Trump was annoying and got on my nerves, when it comes to ratings, he actually helped a Fox News. He helped CNN. Now that you have someone like Joe Biden in office, more people are going to turn towards the right media. Not necessarily the right media, but the conservative media. Typically, that's how it works. So there's that. There's something else to add to this as well. I'll get to it in just a second. One of Lick's big tasks is to name a host for the 9 p.m. hour, which was held by Chris Cuomo before he was ousted last year over his role in advising his older brother, then New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, in his sex harassment scandal. It wasn't just because of that. He was also accused of sexual harassment himself. Notice how they didn't put that in there? CNN has been running rotating hosts, subbing in the likes of Cooper, who has extended his 8 p.m. show an extra hour, and Don Lemon, the network's 10 p.m. host. Lemon, in particular, has taken a beating in the ratings. His Don Lemon Tonight was the lowest ranked show in prime time in August, averaging 660,000 viewers. Here we go. You see that? Now, I want to add in something here about independent media. I believe this is one of the reasons why they wanted to suppress independent media on YouTube, because they wanted more people to go towards mainstream media. This is why if I search for someone, let's say I search for Bernie Sanders, it used to be back in the day, independent media would pop up. That's actually how I found a lot of the left independent media shows. Bernie Sanders was running, and you would get all these other shows that would pop up and recommend and talk about Bernie Sanders. Then that started to change. I would put in Bernie Sanders' name in the search engine in YouTube, and all of a sudden it's CNN, it's Fox News. All of these mainstream media outlets were appearing instead of independent media, and their message about Bernie Sanders was not favorable. This was done in an attempt, I believe, to give mainstream media a boost because they weren't doing well in the ratings. So YouTube figures, look, we pushed them up in the algorithm so that more people will watch them instead of paying attention to the independent media, because we don't want their message to get out. We don't want people to hear the truth about Bernie Sanders. Interesting, huh? So it's been a problem. And they've done all of that, and their ratings are still tanking. And I think part of it is because, not just because of the Trump factor, but also because the American people are waking up and realize, look, I'm not buying this anymore. You guys have misled people. You guys have reported stories that have turned out to be incorrect and didn't come back and correct those stories. That has happened within the past 2 years. You guys have not done good journalism. So people are waking up to that. Younger people are less likely to watch CNN. Let's just be real. Most of my students that were Gen Z were not watching this stuff. So they're tanking. A CNN source told the Post there were no plans to get rid of Lemon despite rumors about his future in the time slot. CNN's Casey Hunt, who was poached from NBC News and MSNBC last year, began hosting the 9 p.m. slot this week. Although Hunt has filled in before, insiders buzz that this could be a tryout for the 37-year-old anchor as the pressure mounts on Lick to fill the spot. She could also be a contender for other primetime spots that open, they said. CNN did not comment. I love this part right here. CNN did not comment. So that's that. Now, my opinion as to why I think they're not fully removing Don Lemon is because honestly, I think they would catch hell if they did that. If they remove Don Lemon the same way that they removed Brian Stelter, the first outcry you would hear from people is they removed a black gay man. This is preposterous. How dare they do that? That would be the outcry. It would be huge, right? So they're not stupid. Chris Lick isn't dumb. So they're just like, we'll just move him to a different show. So they don't get that type of pushback from people. Either way, Don Lemon's prime time tonight is no longer a thing, and he's been bumped up to the morning show. And that is not to mention that Don Lemon has also faced his own allegations as well. He's been accused of sexual misconduct. That went on for a couple of years, that situation. And I believe the gentleman was paid off. I think I covered this like a couple of months ago. The gentleman was paid off. So I don't know, you paying people off. I don't know what's up with that. And then there's also the fact that Don Lemon basically interfered with the Jussie Smollett trial. He gave Jussie Smollett information that he was not supposed to give out. But you see, he was still able to keep his job. So people are not too trusting of CNN anymore. That's all I can say. That's all I can say. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. Saul said, I just can't believe liberal CNN is going right wing. God, it's going to be interesting. Miguel, CNN now under new management. Oh, Miguel. Yep, X. Hi, Sabby. Did you see the Socialist article where Nancy Pelosi threatened railway strikers to accept a corporate deal or else the government would force them to? No, I did not see that. I'm going to have to look into that. Why would anybody want to be a part of this party? You see this? Chris, what is up? Sabby, I know you're discussing a different story, but when you have time, please check out Olami's interview on TYT tonight about prison abolition. Yes, that is on my list to do. I heard. I didn't have time to check it out, but that is on my list. Thank you for the super chat, Duncan. Olami is on TYT discussing abolition tonight. I will check that out. Absolutely. Where Pilgrim, they got a lot of grief for removing the John Harwood, the Washington correspondent. Removing Lemon would be a firestorm. Exactly. They know who to play with. They know who to play with. All right. So we're going to go into our next story here. And I have to give you an update about what has happened with the migrant situation. So last week, I told you that Governor Ron DeSantis had sent migrants from Florida to Martha's Vineyard and also outside of Kamala Harris's house. And I talked about this and I said, look, this is him basically making some type of political gesture here. It's theater. This is basically him putting the ball, I think, in Joe Biden's court and Kamala Harris's court and saying, you wanted them to come here. Now I'm going to send it to these liberal states and let them deal with it. In reference to Martha's Vineyard, there has been a change. Now I'm going to show you the video that shows the response from people in Martha's Vineyard. And then I'm going to tell you about the update. Here we go.
Migrants to Martha's Vineyard bust in unannounced by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. The migrants were brought to Joint Base Cape Cod on Friday, and today the Baker administration says MEMA is working with other state agencies to provide clothing, food, and access to things like health care and legal services. Baker has officially activated 125 members of the National Guard as part of the effort. While volunteers and donations can't be accepted directly at the base, the state is saying that the immediate needs of those in the shelter are being met through existing resources.
Okay, so that happened, and then, oh, give me a second. I'm trying to get out of here. Why is this so huge? Let me cut this here. I actually don't think that's what I wanted to show you. Give me just a second.
The annual Springfield Puerto Rican Parade was held in person for the first time since 2019.
Okay, that was definitely not part of that. Give me just a second. Oh, I know what I'm missing. I want to show you the response from Martha's Vineyard. So let me pull this out first, and then I'm gonna show you that article. I didn't even really need to play that news clip. Some of you just joining are probably like, what is happening? Okay, here we go. Here we go. Yes, that's what I want you to see. Let me go ahead and play this video that shows the response from Martha's Vineyard, because I want to explain both sides of this, but I want you to also understand the level of hypocrisy here. So here we go.
So what are the most difficult challenges right now? The difficult challenges are we have, at some point in time, they have to move from here to somewhere else, right? We don't have the services to take care of 50 immigrants, and we certainly don't have housing. We're in a housing crisis as we are on this island, and so we can't house everyone here that lives here and works here. We don't have housing for 50 more people. So what are the most difficult challenges right now? The difficult challenges are we have, at some point in time, they have to move from here to somewhere else, right? We don't have the services to take care of 50 immigrants, and we certainly don't have housing. We're in a housing crisis as we are on this island, and so we can't house everyone here that lives.
Yeah, that's not true. She said that we don't have the resources. We don't have enough housing. We can't house everyone here. We can't handle 50 migrants. That's not true. So let me tell you what Governor Baker did, and then I'm going to tell you why what she's saying is absolutely incorrect. Now let's go back in here. So here's the article. On Friday, the Commonwealth offered the migrants a voluntary transition from Martha's Vineyard's facility to Joint Base Cape Cod. Put this a little bit bigger. Oops. Okay. On Friday, the Commonwealth offered the migrants a voluntary transition from the Martha's Vineyard facility to Joint Base Cape Cod. State officials provided transportation to individuals and families from the island to a shelter on JBCC, where there are different services to support urgent needs. The layout at JBCC allows organizers to create specific housing areas for families who will remain together as a unit, women and anyone with specific needs, including medical care. MEMA continues to collaborate closely with state agencies and nonprofit organizations to provide individuals and families with access to a variety of services, including clothing and hygiene kits, food and drink, assessment of needs, including ongoing transportation needs, access to healthcare, mental health, and crisis counseling services, access and technical capabilities to ensure ongoing access to legal services, case management for accessing temporary housing and educational services for children, bilingual staff, and interpreter services. The powerful response of the state and local agencies, including the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, the Massachusetts National Guard, the Massachusetts State Police, Dukes County, and Barnstable County, as well as state, local, and federal elected officials, along with MEMA. Okay. They have been moved to Cape Cod. This is what we're going to talk about because there's two sides to this. And I think it's important that I talk about both. What you just heard her say in that video where she said, we don't have the resources and we don't have the housing. That's false. Let me tell you a little bit about Martha's Vineyard. Most of the people that live at Martha's Vineyard only live there during the summer. The majority of residents at Martha's Vineyard are not there during the off season. Right now, we are in the off season. This may be shocking to some of you who live in places like further south where it's probably still warm. If I call my parents in South Carolina, they're probably going to tell me it's still hot. Not so much here, except for the other day, which was random and weird. But it's the off season, which means the majority of the housing at Martha's Vineyard right now is vacant. Whoopsie. She didn't mention that part. So Governor Baker has stepped in and has moved them from Martha's Vineyard to Cape Cod. Now, let me tell you about Cape Cod. Cape Cod, unlike Martha's Vineyard, is easy to get to. You can drive to Cape Cod. Yes, there's still a lot of traffic, but you can drive there. You can't drive to Martha's Vineyard because you can't drive through an ocean. The only ways that you can get to Martha's Vineyard is by plane or by ferry. And if you're driving down to take the ferry, then you got to pay to put your car on the ferry. That's expensive. And then get you all the way over to Martha's Vineyard. Cape Cod has always been the more affordable option. Most people here who are working class, people who are poor, if they're going to go to the beach, they're going to pick Cape Cod over Martha's Vineyard because the Cape is more affordable. Now, granted, there's expensive spots on the Cape and stuff too, but you can go down there just for the day and come right back up. I've done that before too. The point that I'm trying to make is that Martha's Vineyard is expensive. This is where a lot of wealthy people live. To give you an idea, Barack Obama has a house at Martha's Vineyard. You ain't gonna see too many poor people or working class people living on Martha's Vineyard. You just don't. So some people on Twitter were criticizing this, and I was one of them. I'll show that tweet in just a second. Actually, Eric, if you can pull up that tweet, you'll see it. It's the only tweet that actually has text. It was posted today. Because I had to call something out. And it's something I've been talking about for a long time that I've noticed here in Massachusetts. Some of these wealthy towns, some of these wealthy cities, they talk a good game when it comes to supporting certain alienable rights. They talk a good game when it comes to social justice. They talk a good game when it comes to diversity. But the moment it's in their backyard, they push it out. And they'll find excuses to do it, which is what she just did. You know, that's the liberal way of saying, I don't want you here. We don't have the housing. We don't have the resources. Lies. That's how liberals do it. They do it in a covert way. I'm going to show you what I posted. Eric's got that tweet. This is the one. I said, Martha's Vineyard's actions towards migrants just proves my point about elite liberals in Massachusetts. Most of the housing is vacant right now because it's not tourist season. Liberals here support the issues, but they don't want it in their backyard. I went on to say, I'm discussing this tonight. And I went on. I've seen this multiple times with residents in places like Newton, Weston, Dover, Sherburne, Concord, Lexington, on other issues such as housing and education. Now, the point that I want to point out, that people are coming back and they're saying, well, they weren't deported. They were just moved to Cape Cod. Never said they were deported. But I will say this. The wealthy people push them out. And I've seen this happen, and I'm going to give you the examples. I used to rent a room in a city here called Newton. Newton is 15 minutes outside of Boston. That was when I first moved here. I was in grad school. Just needed a place that was on the green line, that was cheap, so I could get to class, at least for the first month or so until I found an apartment and found roommates. The woman I rented the room from was very sweet, very nice. I hope she's well. But one of the things that I have noticed when I lived there is a lot of the wealthy liberals in Newton. This is a city, you've got like doctors and lawyers. Some of the MIT like professors live there, former mayors. Like, this is no cheap place to live. You can't buy a house there under $1 million. But you can rent there. You can rent rooms. You can rent like apartments with roommates. But I think they're trying to get some of that out too. Another story. Anywho, there's this program in Boston called the Mecca Program. It's a busing education program. You can call it the education lottery. What happens is that students in Massachusetts, in the Boston area in particular, they have this opportunity to enter an education lottery. And if they win, if they're selected, they get the opportunity to go to one of the schools that they have on that list. So you have kids coming from inner city neighborhoods like Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, Jamaica Plain. They're usually Black students or Latino students, and they won the education lottery. So they get to go to the school in Newton, which Newton has great public schools. You don't have to go to a private school if you live in Newton. You get what I'm saying? The public schools are that great. So they get on a bus, and they're bused from Roxbury to Newton, to Weston, to Dover, Sherburne, to some of those places I just mentioned there, so that they can go to the schools that have all the resources, the schools where Harvard and Yale recruit from. But then they get back on that bus and they go right back to their neighborhood, and they still have to deal with the issues and the struggles that they have in their neighborhood. There were some comments made when I lived in Newton by some of these liberal, I love gay people, everybody should be together, everybody should have equal opportunity, rich white people in Newton. They made these comments like, well, I feel so bad for those poor Black kids in Roxbury. It must be really difficult and tough. And I understand that they want a good education, but do we have to have so many of them here? Comments like that around me. That's an education example. Let me give you a housing example. At one point, the state was trying to find a way to help Black working class, Latino working class, and I say this because that's predominantly the people living in those neighborhoods, to be able to afford a home outside of Boston, to give them that opportunity to live in the suburban communities so that they don't have to hope that their child wins an education lottery to go to those schools. Sound great, right? They were talking about putting some type of affordable housing or in those areas so that those kids have that opportunity and so that they could be homeowners, which is almost impossible to do unless you have some help. And I'm one of those people that has some help. Let me tell you what the people said in these rich, these little communities. Like, oh no, I mean, I feel so bad for them that they don't have more income, and I wish everyone was able to afford to buy a home. And I couldn't imagine growing up in a neighborhood like that and so much poverty. But if they move in, then our home value is going to decrease. How many of them are you talking about letting come in? 1 or 2? Don't do more than 2, because anything more than 2 would just be, then our neighborhood is not valuable anymore. They would say things like that. Some of the same people who would go to those neighborhoods and they would participate in charity. They would donate clothes to people in those neighborhoods, canned goods, things like that, but they didn't want them in their neighborhood. You get where I'm going? They'll tell you that they're for gay rights. They'll tell you that they think everybody should have a decent education. They'll tell you that they think with the migrant situation, no, people shouldn't be in cages at the border. No, they should be able to just come here and stay here. I'm so glad Massachusetts is a sanctuary state. I'm so glad they're standing by that. They're for it and they support it until it comes next door to them, until it's in their backyard. And instead of just outwardly saying, I don't support it, I don't want to do it, they'll use covert racism as an excuse to push it out. This is one thing that I would say that I have noticed that is different about the conservatives with this opinion. At least they tell you to your face. The wealthy, coastal, elite liberals here will smile in your face, and then behind your back, they'll stab you in the back. They'll come up with lies and excuses to push you out as to why you can't be there. It's a problem. And if you live here, you know what I'm talking about. This is why I say it's not enough for people to tell me that they support something. It's not enough for you to tell me you support Medicare for all. My question is, are you willing to fight for it? And what I have learned about a lot of these elite liberals in these coastal communities, they're not willing to fight for it. Hell, they don't even want it next door to them. They're totally fine with it until it comes in their neighborhood. That's how it works. And they won't say that to your face. They'll say the things I just told you. Oh, we don't want too many of them. Oh dear, do we really want that many? Oh, the value of our homes will go down. It's a problem. So when I say this, because people see Massachusetts as like this progressive haven, it's not. It's progressive in theory, not necessarily progressive in practice. They're called NIMBYs, not in my backyard. So a lot of people were making excuses for the people in Martha's Vineyard. They're like, oh, they did the right thing. And well, what are they supposed to do? The woman said they don't have housing. None of those people live here. So it was interesting to me. But yet they were quick to defend them. Quick to defend. People say, well, I don't see the people in the red states offering to, do and da. They weren't sent there. They were sent to Martha's Vineyard, which claims to be so welcoming and open, which claimed that, yes, we are proud to be a part of a sanctuary state. Yes, we will welcome them here. So then they get here, and it's 50 of them, by the way, 50 people. They're acting like 500 people showed up. So then they get here, and all of a sudden, well, I mean, we can't really, the resources deal with that. We can't really handle that. No, we don't have any housing. What are you talking about? There's hardly nobody there. It's a problem. So yes, I did have to talk about it. I did have to mention it because I do see both sides. Again, do I think this was a political stunt by Ron DeSantis? Absolutely. But you know what he did? He called their bluff. He called their bluff. He said, oh, okay, you say that you will welcome them? All right, I'm going to drop them off at your doorstep and let me see what happens. That's what happened. So they sent them to Cape Cod. I don't know what's going to happen from there. But let me be real here. This was a way of the residents at Martha's Vineyard to say, we are not going to have that in our town. And if you've ever been to Martha's Vineyard, you will know what I'm talking about. We can't have this influx of poor people here. Terrible. Terrible. The rich, white, coastal liberals. They like to point fingers at the conservatives. They'll point fingers at them and say, oh my God, kids in cages. Are they going to put the kids in the cages? No. Are they going to welcome the kids there? No. That's the problem. It is what it is. I had to call it like I see it. Let me go to some of the comments. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Roger. Or excuse me, Eric. I'll take Roger's comment on Rockfin. Okay. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. It is time for ballot initiative to start a public bank to provide funds to build more fixed income homes and put into state constitution a right, not to just a home, but a right to a well-functioning and maintained home condition in regards to all basic services and utilities. Another BI to outlaw private equity from owning housing. Yes, Sab, that's what I was saying about not holding out. Regarding Fox in 2021, I spoke with a progressive state assemblyman about raising taxes on big rich. And he said that if you are worried about the rich leaving, if you raise taxes, you can tax even more on Wall Street activity like derivatives, speculation, high frequency trading, stock transfers, and buybacks, etc. He replied, he's convinced that even if we raise taxes on them, they won't leave because especially NYC is the number one place they want to do their business, and leaving would be forfeiting ground. He was looking to call their bluff. New York State lawmakers had a slew of 14 tax the rich and Wall Street proposals. Cuomo was only willing to let 4 pass, but we did between that and Fed pandemic aid get a surplus of $220 billion because of it. So we have the money. My thing is, if they want to leave because we raise taxes, I got one question. Do you need help packing? Let me. And thank you for this tip as well. Make this very clear. We don't need you. We can create our own jobs via worker co-ops and create a surplus via public banks. North Dakota always runs in surplus mode, and they only have one billionaire who just became one in the last 5 years. When we make New York the state to be, they will all come running back. And then they will tell them the price of admission is extremely high tax hikes. We won't need you. We are good without you. Good point. Thank you for mentioning North Dakota, Roger Meadows. A friend of mine moved to North Dakota one time, and just for a couple of years, but he moved there because he was like, dude, North Dakota, there's more jobs than people. And I was like, what? So he moved there because they paid really well. He lived there for, I think, like 3 years, made a lot of money, saved his money, and then he moved back to North Carolina. Rodrigo, Sabby Sabs, did you see Jimmy cover your rising appearance? I did. I saw that yesterday. Thanks for that. Yeah, that was interesting. Stefan says open borders is the most practical and easiest route to all of this nonsense. Sweary Fairy, don't have or won't give. Bad cookies. We can't house them here, but there are some nice dumpsters in the next town over. Right? Send the text. We can't expect the wealthy to be inconvenienced. I know, right? Oh God, we can't have them here. What would the appearances look like when tourist season comes back around? That's what that's about. Credit is born. Maslow's hierarchy of needs applies in the US only if you have cash. Thanks for the super chat, Gina. BLM signs hit different on Palo Alto mansions, right? That's right. And that's another thing. They would have these BLM signs in their window and whatever, man. Susan, Malcolm X was right. Or Suzanne, excuse me. Thank you for the super chat, Scott. Plug Why Democracy Fails the Global South on Justin Podur, Anti-Empire Pod. How democracy is used to control third world. Highly recommend. Ooh, good recommend there, Scott. I'll have to check that out. And, another one from Rodrigo. Rodrigo, Sabby Sabs, were you on Bad Faith podcast? Yes, I was on a recording today. Me, Nick, and CJ were on there. So you guys should see that, I believe this week. So yeah. How'd you know that? How are you guys knowing these things before I tell you? I don't know how you guys know this stuff. All right, I'm going to go to our final story here. Why? Oh, I went to the wrong thing. With Chris Hedges. So Chris Hedges is always on point. He actually has a show on the Real News Network. I don't know if you guys follow, but Real News Network, his show is called The Chris Hedges Report. And I saw an episode that he did recently, and he's talking about why the Democratic Party is giving money to support Republican candidates. And I've talked about this as well. He goes a little bit further into this. So I'm going to play a clip from this, and then we're going to get into this whole idea of this Pied Piper strategy and if it really works and when has it backfired. So let's go ahead and dive into that.
What are we to make of a Democratic Party that embraces an election strategy that includes demobilizing the majority working class, non-Republican electorate, legitimizing right-wing agendas and narratives, seeks bipartisan cooperation with right-wing politicians such as Liz Cheney, refuses to attack archaic minority rule institutions, including the Electoral College and the Senate filibuster, repeatedly backs down from hauling Donald Trump into court, and funds far-right Republican candidates in this year's primary elections, repeating the disastrous Hillary Clinton campaign's Pied Piper ploy of promoting the supposedly more beatable Trump in the 2016 Republican presidential primaries. Why is the Democratic Party lavishly funding Trump stooges, such as John Gibbs, a former Trump administration official who claimed that Joe Biden's 2020 election victory was, quote unquote, mathematically impossible, by giving his campaign $425,000, investing more money in one pro-Gibbs television ad than Gibbs raised for his entire campaign?
Mm-hmm.
Why do they see the stoking of fascist fire as an effective campaign strategy? Even the New York Times has called the tactic of funding far-right pro-Trump candidates a, quote, cynical low for the Democratic Party. Joining me to discuss what is taking place in our bizarre political landscape as we head towards the midterm elections the cultist Trump Republican Party looks set to win, is the historian Paul Street. Paul has taught at numerous Chicago area universities and is the author of This Happened Here, Neoliberals, Amerikaners, and the Trumping of America. He also writes regularly for Counterpunch. So, Paul, in one of your columns, you tick off, I think, a kind of laundry list of all of the egregious failures on the part of the Democratic Party that you argue, I think correctly, has resulted in the rise of a figure like Trump. And I want to begin by going through them. A capitalist system whose underlying tendency towards the ever-increasing concentration of wealth and hence power repeatedly humiliates, delegitimizes, and discredits democracy in the eyes of the masses, helping open the door to authoritarian solutions.
Let's pause here. Let's look at this for a second. A capitalist system whose underlying tendency towards the ever-increasing concentration of wealth and hence power repeatedly humiliates, delegitimizes, and discredits democracy in the eyes of the masses, helping open the door to authoritarian solutions. So again, he's critiquing capitalism here in reference to the Democratic Party. So he's not just calling out the Democratic Party, he's also calling out capitalism as well as a part of this. And the problem, basically how they both work together in this Pied Piper strategy here that I'll get into an article about just a little bit. But this idea that you have Democrat politicians endorsing Republican candidates, but not just Republican candidates, but Trump-like candidates. This goes far back. It's not a new thing. And another thing I want to point out as well is that there's also been Republicans who have endorsed Democrat candidates. If we want to go back to when Kamala Harris was running as Attorney General in California, Donald Trump's family did donate to Kamala Harris. I'm not sure if everyone is aware of that. Here's the thing. They can donate to each other. They do this it's no big deal to them. And that's why I say at the end of the day, they're really just one team. They're really just one team. So let's go back into the video here.
Can you talk about that process?
Well, there's a longstanding toxic relationship between economic inequality, socioeconomic inequality, and democracy. Wealth concentration is also power concentration, and wealth concentration translates, not just under capitalism, but in any social formation, translates into disproportionate authoritarian influence over the making of government decisions. That wealth concentration is inherent in the very nature and the workings and the operations and the contradictions of capitalism as a system. And it's just an ongoing tension in Western history. It's an ongoing tension in American history. And, when you repeatedly violate and undermine and humiliate majority of public opinion on one issue after another, there's a huge empirical social and political science research on how technically irrelevant public opinion has become in the contemporary American neoliberal plutocracy. It's just extraordinary. Take your issue. Recently, abortion rights, gun rights, climate action, healthcare as a human right, union organizing rights. You can just go through this list of one thing after another that is supported by relatively progressive policy, sometimes more than just relatively progressive policy, that's supported by a majority of the population.
And I want to add a point here that the Democratic Party would rather go against all those policies that he just mentioned, those progressive policies. They'd rather go against that and have a Republican win than support those policies, or to have someone who supports those policies win. This is another reason why I say it's just one corporate party. The Democratic Party would have rather had Donald Trump win again than a Bernie Sanders win. I call it like I see it.
Student debt forgiveness, for example, and it's canceled. It's called capitalist cancel culture, I guess. It's canceled by corporate and financial power, by concentrated wealth translating concentrated power. And when this happens and accumulates again and again and again enough over decades, ultimately the notion of democracy and popular self-rule, I think, becomes exposed as bankrupt, as useless, as irrelevant, and people don't take it particularly seriously. And particularly when the party that claims to be the party of the working people, that claims to be the party of the working class, the party of the poor, is egregiously in bed with corporate and financial power, it's going to be unable to reliably and consistently bring to the polls the voters that they need to defeat the other party, which, by the way, just happens to have gone essentially fascistic over really since Obama, if not before. And yet that very system that's undermining democracy is also constantly generating crises, ecological crises, health crises, zoonotic viruses that are just endemic under this system, mass poverty, mass homelessness, rampant alienation, just a kind of a spiritual meaningless to a life under the rule of a class that's imposed. And Marx and Engels wrote about this in Purple Passages in the mid-19th century, that drowns everything in the icy waters of egotistical calculation and turns and subordinates everything to profit motive. So you're constantly generating economic crises and social crises and spiritual crises. And, of probably the greatest significance right now in this time that we have left on Earth, unbelievable fast-moving ecological crises and which the ecological crises then feed into and help generate more social and political crises. And you have crises that need solutions, but democracy is no longer credible or viewed as legitimate because its authenticity has been undermined by the underlying class dictatorship of capital. People are going to turn to authoritarian more explicitly. We already have an authoritarian. A capitalist society is an authoritarian society. It's a de facto class dictatorship. But nonetheless, there has been previously, for most of American history, this kind of bourgeois, democratic, constitutional, electoral rule of law form where at the end of the day you honor the outcomes of elections. Now we have one of the two major capitalist parties is really ready to, and is in fact rejecting that, and is ready to even.
Okay. I want to jump in here for a second. One thing I will add is he said we have one of the two capitalist parties. I think it's just one corporate party. I think it's one capitalist corporate party that tries to say that they are two separate entities based on a couple of social issues. It's not so much about economic issues the way that it used to be, right? So I think that he hits the nail like on the head here when he says technically we already have authoritarianism, but it's done under a class system. And so we have a de facto class, and anybody who is not a part of that class system, we kind of just have to obey the order of law, right? We have to obey, we're basically just ants. There's a song by Dave Matthews Band called Ants Marching. That's a pretty good song. That's probably actually my favorite Dave Matthews Band CD. No, I take that back. There's another one too. It's the one that has Crash. Is that the one with Crash on it? Anyway, there's a song by Dave Matthews called Ants Marching. And sometimes that's what it feels like. Like sometimes it feels like you get up in the morning, you go to work, you do what you got to do, then you get back in your car, you get on the train, the subway, whatever your transportation method is, and then you have to deal with the long commute again, at least a lot of us do here, and then you get back home, and then it's like you have just enough time to get dinner, maybe watch a show or two, and then you go to sleep and you wake up the next morning and you do it all over again. Sometimes it's just like ants. If you were to go up to the top of like a skyscraper here in Boston. Let's say you went up to the top of the Prudential Center and you just take a look down sometimes, and all you see are just people just rushing here and moving there, rushing here and moving there. And it does feel like that sometimes, that we're just ants. Worker bees.
Strip the last embers, the last shreds, the last remnants of what's left of democracy, and crossing over into this authoritarian space. And, Mussolini and Hitler made the trains run on time, and Trump comes in 2016 and says, I alone can fix the solutions. And you have this very alienated populace that's prone to magical thinking because of the insanity of the corporate culture that they live in. And they look for solutions in great leaders. No matter how comic and ridiculous and pathetic and malignantly narcissistic those leaders may be, they can capture a certain essence. There's a certain brilliance to people like Bolsonaro and Orban and Trump and other modern day neo-fascist authoritarians who are going to fix things for the people and dig into some very revanchist and reactionary cultural strains as they do that. And the Democrats have created a context for that. They've participated quite richly in that, and now they're actually not only indirectly creating the context for it, but now they have this cynical Pied Piper electoral calculation whereby they're directly contributing to the rise of the most right-wing fanatic Republican candidates on the Senate.
Okay, let me chime in here. So he mentioned that phrase Pied Piper. And yes, so the idea is that the Democrats would actually contribute financially to that far right candidate, someone like a Donald Trump, in hopes that that is the person that the Republican Party would prop up, but hoping that it would backfire, because then people would have to move further to the right and support that candidate and vote for that candidate. And the idea is that most likely people are not going to be willing to do that enough so that that candidate would win. Well, obviously that backfired in 2016. They used that strategy with Donald Trump, and we saw how that turned out. So it doesn't always work. And I think the idea that someone like Donald Trump beating Hillary Clinton, who was already a politician, who was pretty well known in the political spaces. Her husband was president 2 election cycles in a row. The idea that he would come in and beat someone like her, it was just absolutely laughable at best, I think, to a lot of liberals and to the Democratic Party, the DNC altogether. But at the same time, it happened. So that strategy has backfired before. And you would think that they would have learned their lesson from 2016. But no, here they are again. We're going into the midterms. And once again, they are choosing to support these candidates. They're still doing it. So let me let him go on a little bit here.
Theory that those are the most beatable candidates in the 2022 midterms. And they're really playing with fire. They're really playing with fire. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about why that's not likely to work. Actually, it seems like a doomed, suicidal, kind of a suicide pact way of going forward. It's I guess they think they're being daring and cool, and it's a great gamble that's going to pay off. But I don't think it is. And maybe we can say a thing or two more about why it won't.
Well, let's talk about it, because you write about it. You, I think, correctly point out that the Republicans probably are going to win, and these fringe far-right figures will be swept into office with that landslide. You also write, I thought, quite presciently about abortion, because the Democrats are banking so much of their electoral strategy on the fact that they will protect the right of a woman to control her own body. They use the referendum that was passed in Kansas, but you really, I think, quite astutely explain why that isn't going to work. So why don't we do that now?
Yeah, well, the midterms that are coming up are stuck in a historical pattern. It's almost a law that the party, particularly during its first term in White House power, loses significant numbers of members in the House of Representatives in the first midterm election. The only exceptions are 1932 because of the Great Depression and the New Deal, Roosevelt in 2002 because of 9/11 and the Bush party was able to keep going. They always lose. Why that is an interesting matter. We don't have time to discuss. There's this problem of inflation, which is just devastating for the Democrats. There's Biden's incredibly low popularity numbers, which are just cratering. They're in their high 30s at best.
Let's pause here for just a second. Now, this poll came out September 7th. 57% of Americans disapprove of the president. All of these polls I've seen so far have been different. But I will say this. He brought up the idea about abortion being the winner for Democrats in the midterms. And I agree with him in the sense that I don't think this is going to be the push that Democrats think it's going to be. By Democrats, I mean those in Congress think that this is going to be to push a lot of people to come out and vote in the midterms. I said the same thing about canceling 10K to 20K student loan debt. I don't think that's going to be the push that they think it is to get young people out to the midterms. And I'll give you the reasons why here. Particularly, most people are not voting in the midterm election cycle. Most people come out to vote for the president of the United States. So there's that. Two, in reference to student loan, again, the people most likely affected, those of us who are millennials, Gen Z, there's some Gen Xers in there that may be affected, and even some boomers, believe it or not, but the majority of people that are affected tend to be more so on the younger end. We don't usually come out and vote in the midterms. So again, I don't think this is going to be the push that they think it's going to be. And then when it comes to abortion rights, we still see, and I covered this on RBN on Friday, we still see that now even Chuck Schumer is saying that Democrats are in danger of losing in the midterms, which is the opposite of what we have been told the past 3 weeks or so. Chuck Schumer is now openly admitting that it's not looking too good. And that's why I said I didn't think that the overturn of Roe v. Wade with the Supreme Court was going to be this big, gigantic push that Democrats thought it would be to get them that support in the midterms. It's still very close and still a little too soon to tell at this point, but I don't think that it's a shoo-in for them. And I think it's dangerous for them to assume that it is, to be honest.
You know, and the percentage of people in the country that say the country is on the wrong track is a big indicator, and that number is just huge. So it really, really looks bad. Now, this notion that the abortion issue is going to be some sort of magic bullet, it's going to provide the solution for the Democrats and allow them to keep the House of Representatives in the Senate in 2022 in November is really, really problematic. And there's a cynicism about that. And it goes back to this whole last 7-8 months. I heard numerous Democrats in Iowa tell me this was part of the advanced surrender to the abolition of Roe v. Wade, to the reversal of women's right to an abortion. I actually heard Democrats say to me, it's okay. First of all, they totally underestimated how devastating this decision would be, and it's already showing itself to be for women in half the states in the country right now. But they said it would be okay because it's going to work to our electoral advantage in November, which, among other things, is just incredibly cynical. And
not only that, but they decided to fundraise off of it. Not even an hour later, after that overturn decision was made, I started receiving text messages saying, we need your help. Please donate so we can, overturn Roe v. Wade and fix it and abolish the filibuster. And like, no, are you kidding? They couldn't even let the ink dry. That quickly, they were already trying to fundraise off of Roe v. Wade.
And it's a remarkable statement of moral, political, and policy bankruptcy that your strategy going forward is a horrific decision coming out of the Supreme Court and the horrific fascistic nature of the other party. That's your campaign strategy. So they say they're going to win on abortion, and they cite this Kansas referendum And they cite it quite deceptively as proof that this is the way we're going to keep the House of Representatives. This is the way.
But I would add to this point here, voters in Kansas decided to keep abortion legal in the state, rejecting an amendment. Again, that was something that was done on the local level. This is why I tell people when it comes to electoral politics and some type of change, you have a better chance at accomplishing this on the local level than you do in national politics. Kansas has shown us that. We've shown people that here in Massachusetts multiple times over the things that we've passed here that Bernie Sanders and them are still trying to get the rest of Congress and the Senate on board with. They'll never get all of them on board with these policies. People are already implementing them on the state level. $15 minimum wage. What's the paid family leave? We just implemented that last year here in Massachusetts. The $15 minimum wage was passed years ago in Massachusetts. Legalization of marijuana. It's been a couple of years since that was passed, and we have cannabis shops here, and they are very profitable. So you see what I'm saying? The best chance at getting these things done is on the local level, instead of us waiting another president cycle and another president cycle and another president cycle. And they keep giving us crumbs here and there and not implementing these policies. And meanwhile, they're getting richer and the rest of us are getting poor. So even though Democrats may point to that decision there in Kansas as a win, they have to remember that that was done on the local level. They really did not need the Congress in DC to do anything to make that happen. They were able to do it on their own. And I sincerely think this is what we're going to see moving forward. More states are going to start making these rules on their own. They're going to start saying, we are not waiting on Congress. Forget Joe Manchin in the Senate. We're going to start passing some of these things locally right here in our own state. And we are not sitting back like crossing our fingers, hoping that people in DC are going to do the right thing.
We're going to keep trying. And the problem with that is yes, there was a policy-specific referendum in Kansas recently and consistent with longstanding majority, 50-year majority public opinion in support of a woman's constitutional right to an abortion. Even in Kansas, in a right-wing state like Kansas, more than 2/3 of the people, or was it 2/3, supported keeping the right to an abortion in Kansas Constitution. Great. That's cool. But that was an election that's about a specific policy issue. That's not what our savagely time-staggered, partisan, corporate crafted, big media, biennial and quadrennial extravaganzas are about. They're not policy referendums. They're not even particularly about policy. They're people vote about the most ridiculous things imaginable, which candidate they want to go out and have a beer with. But nowadays, in this hyper partisan polarized environment, they vote a lot on the basis purely of party now. We're at a high water mark of partisan polarization. And the abortion issue in November is going to be folded into any number of various issues. There's all kinds of things that people will be thinking about, even insofar as they're thinking about policy and all, and not just thinking about the candidates they like the most and the party that they like the most, and where abortion is going to rank in that policy mix compared to, for example, the price of gas or the price of food, or issues people have about grievances they have about what's going on in schools with their kids, or COVID policy. There's a mishmash of issues, all of which kind of get thrown together in a smorgasbord and subordinated to campaign finance, to campaign contributions, to media buys, to media ads, and to partisan logics. And so, it's not even remotely clear that the abortion issue, I suppose there does appear to be a bit of an abortion rights backlash, which may help the Democrats contain some of their damage in the midterm elections. But it's not at all clear that it's going to be anything remotely close to what they say it's going to be to save their majority position in the House and the Senate.
That's right. He hit the nail right on the head. This is the problem with the parties. People should be focusing more on policy. Again, that issue there with Kansas over abortion rights, that was about a policy, just policy. It wasn't about a candidate. It wasn't about a party. Kansas is primarily what? A red state. So it wasn't about that. It was about the policy. And that's what we need to get back to. We need to get back to the policies, not about the parties. Now, this whole idea of the Pied Piper strategy, I told you it's not new. The risky strategy Democrats are using to win elections. So there's the Pied Piper there just doing his thing. You see the picture there? He's like, follow me. Okay, first I'm going to define it again for you. What is a Pied Piper strategy? The strategy takes its name from the medieval German legend about a mysterious piper who arrives in the town of Hamlet, which is suffering from a plague spread by rats. In a common telling of the story, the piper offers to solve the problem in exchange for payment. Hamlin's mayor agrees. The piper plays his magic pipe, luring the rats into the river where they all drown. The mayor refuses to pay up. The piper does the same to the town's children. Pretty gruesome story there, but yeah. And then in politics, a Pied Piper candidate plays a tune for his party's base, and voters dutifully follow him off a cliff. Now, let me explain how they typically leverage them, because I think this is important to break down for people. How do campaigns leverage Pied Piper candidates? Let's say you're a Senate candidate in a purple state who's running unopposed for your party's nomination. You've got money to burn and time on your hands. Meanwhile, the other party's primary has devolved into a knife fight between A, the electable moderate, and B, the fire-breathing extremist. A is a real threat, but facing B would be a dream come true. Independents can't stand B. Members from every wing of your party will show up in force just to keep B out of office. You'll win in a landslide. An example, Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, only the moderate Hillary Clinton did not win. So you decide to give B a little boost. You can write him a check he'd never accept it. You can't directly coordinate with his campaign. That's illegal. You also can't run an ad that says vote for B so I can crush him in November. That's a little too on the nose. So you do the next best thing. You run an attack ad against B that makes him sound irresistible to his party's base. Don't vote for B, the TV warns. B supports X and Y. The subtext being that X and Y are very bad policies. But wait, the likely primary voter thinks, I also support X and Y. Maybe I should vote for B. B soars in the polls. B beats A. You've created a monster. And that's exactly what happened with Hillary and Trump. And they give different examples here where that has happened on the local level. And they also talk about where this has happened recently in the 2022 midterms in reference to Illinois billionaire Governor J.B. Pritzker. He's running unopposed for the Democratic nomination, spent nearly $33 million attacking Republican gubernatorial candidate Richard Irvin, the first Black mayor of suburban Aurora, Illinois. Irvin presented a serious threat. State Senator Darren Bailey, the Republican who won in the June 28th primary, did not. So that's another example. And then, let me get my mouse back here. Okay. And I'm going to show you the example here. This is the one in reference to Hillary Clinton. Has this strategy been tried before? Yes. A 2015 memo written by Hillary Clinton's campaign staff urged the DNC to elevate extreme Pied Piper candidates in the Republican primaries, specifically Ted Cruz, Ben Carson, and the eventual winner, Donald Trump. Democrats, the memo read, should work to position those candidates as leaders of the pack and then tell the press to take them seriously. This strategy would ideally force all Republican candidates to adopt extreme conservative positions and prevent the eventual GOP nominee from making inroads to our coalition or independents. We all know how that turned out. And there you have it. So just remember that whenever you hear Hillary Clinton blame Bernie Sanders, Russia for the reason why she lost, just remember the strategy that I just told you there, the Pied Piper strategy, and it backfired massively because they didn't think, oh, those independents aren't going to support Trump. He's so extreme. I don't think they realized just how much people disliked Hillary Clinton. So that's that. I'm going to go to some of the comments in the chat. Let me go to Rockfin really quick. Pull this one up. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Also, how far to the right has the Overton window been moved if Discovery Plus thinks CNN should move back to the center? Like, these corporatists think CNN is commie. What a joke. As a community, the Black community, we are square pegs. The left tried to put us into round holes. This is an assumption that we will always be for all left policies. But see what happens when we are jab hesitant, we don't vote. That's another good example to point out, Roger. Bernie, when he says he's against reparations, a lot of us in our community are for guns and against abortion, and this right here, immigration. I think if they would have provided these migrants caught in the middle with places to stay, where I'm pretty sure that there is a crisis in, as you say, Roxbury, shout out to New Edition and Ed OG and the Bulldogs. Yeah, for those who don't know, New Edition was from Roxbury. Those Black people would have had something to say. That's a good point. I see it here in NYC. You got people and Black people here who are suffering and make up more of the homeless population than anyone else. We can be very inconvenient thorn in their left paw. To all of you left parties, be it Dem or MPP, never assume we're automatically with you and all of the left policies. Ignore us at your own electoral risk. And now you see why I'm not for parties, Sabby. Too much BS and dishonesty. They can keep the BS, just give me the ballot initiative. I would run one abolishing all political parties at every level of government in my state. Make this hamster wheel of a merry-go-round stop now. Sabby, the clash on the left, the final showdown between the white-collar suburban PMC who only cares about abortion, identity politics, guns, immigration, vote blue no matter who shit, and the populist left who cares about universal policies like Medicare for all, tax big rich, paychecks permanently above local rent rates, infrastructure as it pertains to broadband, power, H2O, and transportation has been looming since Clinton Dems. Might just be in for a rude awakening when they see people care more about working, struggling, and hurting class issues more than they do about the old liberal cultural stuff. I truly believe these working poor class issues have overtaken it by far, and they won't know it until it's too late. You, the person Chris was interviewing, I knew people who eventually would see it the way I see it. And thank you for this tip as well. Where we must do these things at state and local level, that is the only way we will get these things done. I've seen this in the past few years. Always remember, with little patience and gumption, people will eventually come around. Hit them with the BI if you can. If not, build worker co-ops. Well said, Roger. Thank you so much for that. Johnny says, remember when they are calling us crazy for exposing this back in 2016? Now it's an open strategy. Rodrigo, Sabby Sabs, Nick gave it away on Twitter, LOL. Oh, okay. I was wondering, I'm like, how do they know these things are happening before I tell them? Bad cookies. The way I read that, Sabby, is that money does that to democracy, not any party in general. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yes. And I should have explained it that way. Regardless of the party, if you have money involved, the corporate money involved, that's the problem. Moused it. It's one big club and they're swinging it at you. Roberts, you also saw the oligarchs like Bloomberg pull together against Bernie. That's right. Send the text. The Democrats and Republicans only care that their class wins. That is where they're always in unity. Oh, where? That is where they're always in unity. That's right. That's right. Lauren, if we vote on policy, we can't vote for Democrats or Republicans. God. You guys hear that? And Lord Nugatron. Jimmy Dore Show brought me new fan and subscriber now. Oh, thank you so much and welcome. Shout out. And I think that's a little bunny in the picture. Awesome, cute, loves. All right, guys, that is it for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow with more news. We got some pretty cool things coming up. So keep it real, guys. Keep it real. Thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight. And you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.